Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate it. Okay, I had to put this on my phone right now. Sorry. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips balance in favor of fair use. Hi there, our bucket list. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in, girl. Lots of love. I know you're going to be busy driving, so enjoy your day. Appreciate you so much. In Matthew 18, verse 6, it said, But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depths of the sea. A lot of people tell us to stop getting out there, stop, just drop it. People say you need to just forget, whatever. Isaiah says, 117, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take out the cause of the fatherless, in the case of the widow. Oh, thank you so much. Without further ado, a friend of mine had, I think it's probably maybe had been a year ago or so, he had wanted me to do this story on the Moore's murders. Ian, Brady, and Myra Hindley around Manchester, England. Maybe he'll come back and look at it later. Without further ado, share the screen. This is going to be a lengthy one because I'm going to get as many facts in here. I like using different websites and such as. This is Myra Hindley, okay? This is, she was a notorious English serial killer involved in the tragic murders of 5 children alongside her partner, Ian Brady. Her crimes shocked the nation and led to her imprisonment for life. That's where the 8th body found in New England. And who is Myra Hindley? Myra Hindley was an infamous English serial killer born on July 23, 1942 in Manchester, England. Her life took a dark turn after she met Ian Brady in 1961, a man with a criminal background who would lead her into a life of depravity. The two formed a bond that would ultimately result in one of the most notorious crime sprees in British history. How do we not know that she actually did dark things herself? I mean, why didn't she leave him, right? Together, they were responsible for the brutal rapes and murders of 5 young children in the early 1960s. Their heinous acts went undiscovered for several years until a crucial tip-off from Hindley's brother-in-law initiated a police investigation leading to their arrest. Thank you so much to Hindley's brother-in-law. Hindley's trial began on April 27, 1966, where she and Brady pled not guilty to several charges. Despite her denial, she was found guilty of the murders of two of the children and also charged with harboring a murderer. She received a life sentence, which she served until her death on November 16, 2002, in prison. Over her years of incarceration, Hindley claimed she had several ties with Brady and insisted on her innocence, yet her later confession revealed her full involvement in the crimes. Hindley's notoriety continues to provoke public fascination and horror, cementing her place in the annals of criminal history. Her early life. Myra Hindley was born July 23, 1942, in Manchester, England. Her early years were spent in the care of her grandmother, a significant figure during her formative period. Hindley faced emotional turmoil after the drowning death of a close male friend, when she was just 15 years old. The tragic event profoundly affected her, leading to her decision to leave school. This tragic event, okay, how do we know she wasn't involved? Was she around the area when he was? I'd like to know more about that, you know? This tragic event profoundly affected her, leading to her decision to leave school. In a search for solace, she converted to Roman Catholicism, seeking a framework that could provide her with moral guidance and stability amidst her turbulent youth. This period marked the beginning of her estrangement from a conventional life, setting the stage for future decisions that would change her life irrevocably. At 61, Hindley's life took a dramatic turn when she met Ian Brady, or Ian, whichever way they pronounced it, a stock clerk with a criminal history. Their relationship quickly intensified, and she fell deeply in love, surrendering herself into his control and influence. Brady represented a sharp departure from her previous existence, introducing her to a darker world that would eventually lead them both down a path of criminality. Hindley's education, in the traditional sense, was cut short, but the lessons she learned from her encounters during this formative stage would have catastrophic consequences, molded her into one of the most notorious figures in British criminal history. Myra Hindley's life took a dark turn upon her meeting Ian Brady in 61, as this relationship will lead to one of the most notorious crime sprees in British history. The couple quickly became inseparable, and Hindley fell under Brady's influence, ultimately succumbing to his insidious plans. The initial crime, the abduction and murder of 16-year-old Pauline Reade in July 1963, marked the beginning of a chilling series of events. By exploiting Hindley's trust and loyalty, Brady orchestrated their heinous acts, revealing a troubling dynamic that spiraled into a cycle of violence. Continuing their spree, the couple was responsible for the murders of four more children over the following years, including 12-year-olds John Kilbride and Keith Bennett, and 10-year-old Lesley Ann Downey. Hindley's role in these crimes were pivotal. She lured the children into traps set by Brady, making her an accomplice in the gruesome fates. The horror of their action not only sent shockwaves through the local community, but also caught the attention of law enforcement, leading to a significant break in the case when Hindley's brother in law, David Smith, reported the crimes to the police. Trial and sentence justice served. The trial of Myra Hindley and her accomplice Ian Brady began on April 27, 66, among intensified public scrutiny and media frenzy. Both defendants pled not guilty to the murders that they committed, including the tragic deaths of Lesley Ann Downey and Edward Evans. However, the shocking evidence presented, particularly testimony from Hindley's brother in law, David Smith, who had witnessed a murder, was pivotal. Ultimately, the court found Brady guilty of 3 murders, while Hindley was convicted for her involvement in 2 murders and for harboring a murderer. They were both sentenced to life imprisonment, marking a significant moment in the pursuit of justice for the innocent victims. Hindley's trial reignited discussions about the legal system's handling of serious crimes. Many viewed the sentence as a long awaited verdict that delivered justice to the families of the young victims, while others debated the appropriateness of life sentences for such heinous acts. I agree. Why do you want to pay to have them continue being in jail? Why can't you just go ahead and the death penalty there, right? Healy's contrasting portrayal, both as a willing accomplice and a remorseful individual in later years, left an imprint on public perception. As appeals for parole were repeatedly denied, her sentencing became emblematic of the broader concern regarding society's response to the crimes against children, reinforcing the idea that justice had in fact been served. Well, that ain't justice, the taxpayers still had to pay for them to be in jail, right? You're still paying for her. Confession and death, Myra Hindley, one of England's most notorious serial killers, became a focal point of public fascination and horror due to her chilling confessions of the violent nature of her crimes. After severing ties with her partner, Ian Brady, in 70, Hindley initially maintained her innocence. However, a significant turn occurred in 87 when she disclosed her full confession, admitting her involvement in horrific murders of 5 children, including Pauline Reade and Lesley Ann Downey. This revelation not only reignited media attention, but also prompted widespread public outrage, renewing discussions regarding her initial trial and sentencing. Despite her attempts to portray herself as a changed individual over the years, Henley's applications for parole were consistently denied. I mean, you didn't give the kids a chance to get up and grow up, okay? Excuse me, you took away their lives. The legal and public scrutiny surrounding her case highlighted the complexity of her character, oscillating between a seemingly remorseful figure seeking redemption and the cold blooded murderer she was convicted of being. Henley's life came to a close on November 16, 2002, when she died of respiratory failure in prison. Her death marked the end of an infamous chapter in British criminal history, leaving behind a legacy of fear and a reminder of the depths of human depravity. Here goes more of her life and her financial. I don't want to read too much of that. Okay. Let's get on down. I want to go ahead and get into this more because there's going to be more on other. This is the Moore's murders. This is Ian Brady right here and Myra Hindley. It was a series of child killings committed by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley in and around Manchester, England, between July 1963 and October 1965. The 5 victims, Pauline Reade, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Lesley Ann Downey, and Edward Evans, were aged between 10 and 17, and at least 4 of them were sexually assaulted. The bodies of 2 of the victims were discovered in 1965 and graves dug on Saddleworth Moor. A third grave was discovered there in 1987, more than 20 years after Brady and Henley's trial. Bennett's body is also thought to be buried there, but despite repeated searches, it remains undiscovered. Brady and Henley were charged only for the murders of Kilbride, Downey, and Evans and received life sentences under a whole life tariff. The investigation was reopened in 85 after Brady was reported as having confessed to the murders of Reade and Bennett. Henley stopped claiming her innocence in 87 and confessed to all the murders. After confessing to these additional murders, Brady and Henley were taken separately to Saddleworth Moor to assist in the search for the graves. Characterized by the press as the most evil woman in Britain, Hindley made several appeals against her last sentence, claiming she was a reformed woman and no longer a danger to society, but was never released. She died in 2002 in West Suffolk Hospital, aged 60, after serving 36 years in prison. Brady was diagnosed as a psychopath in 1985 and confined to a high security Ashworth hospital. He made it clear that he wished to never be released and repeatedly asked to be allowed to die. He died in 2017 in Ashworth, aged 79, having served 51 years. The murders were the result of what Malcolm McCulloch, professor of forensic psychiatry at Cardiff University, described as a concatenation of circumstances. The trial judge, Justice Fenton Atkinson, described Brady and Hindley in his closing remarks as two sadistic killers of the utmost depravity. The crimes were the subject of extensive worldwide media coverage. So here's where Ian Brady was born in the Gorbals area of Glasgow as Ian Duncan Stewart on January the 2nd, 1938, to Margaret Peggy Stewart, an unmarried tea room waitress. The identity of Brady's father has never been reliably ascertained, although his mother said he was a journalist working for a Glasgow newspaper who died 3 months before Brady was born. Brady's mother had little support and after a few months was forced to give her son into the care of Mary and John Sloan, a local couple with 4 children of their own. Brady took their family name and became known as Ian Sloan. His mother continued to visit him throughout his childhood. At age 9, and Brady, why did I want to put that up there? Sorry. Brady, Brady visited Loch Lomond with his family, where he reportedly discovered an affinity for the outdoors. A few months later, the family moved to a new council house on an Overspill estate on Pollock. Various authors have stated that Brady tortured animals. That trigger warning. It was reported, for example, that he boasted of killing his first cat when he was age 10. Then went on to burn another cat alive, stone dogs, and cut off rabbits' heads. Brady, however, denied any accusations of animal abuse specifically. Brady's behavior worsened when he attended Shawlands Academy, a school for above average pupils. As a teenager, he twice appeared before a juvenile court for housebreaking. Brady left the academy aged 15 and took a job as a tea boy at a Heartland and Wolf shipyard in Govan. 9 months later, he began working as a butcher's messenger boy. Wow. Brady had a friend, Evelyn Grant, but their relationship ended when he threatened her with a flick knife after she visited a dance with another boy. He again appeared before the court, this time with 9 charges against him. And shortly before his 17th birthday, he was placed on probation on condition that he lived with his mother. By then, it just keeps messing up. Brady's mother had moved to Manchester and married an Irish fruit merchant named Patrick Brady. Patrick got Ian a job as a fruit porter at Smithfield Market, and Ian took Patrick's last name. Okay, that's where I was wondering where he got that from. Okay. Within a year of moving to Manchester, Brady was caught with a sack full of lead seals. he had stolen and it was trying to smuggle out of the market. He was sent to Strange Ways prison for 3 months, as he was still under the age of 18. Brady was sentenced to 2 years in a borstal. I don't know what a borstal is, for training. He was sent to Latchmere House in London, and then to Hatfield Borstal in the West Riding of Yorkshire. After being discovered drunk on alcohol he had brewed, Brady was moved to the much tougher unit in Hull. Released on the 14th of November 57, Brady returned to Manchester where he took a labor job which he hated, and was dismissed from another job in a brewery. Deciding to better himself, he obtained a set of instruction manuals on bookkeeping from a local public library, with which he astonished his parents by studying alone in his room for hours. In January 1959, Brady applied for and was offered a clerical job at Millward's Merchandising, a wholesale chemical distribution company based in Gordon. He was regarded by his colleagues as a quiet, punctual, but short-tempered young man. Brady read books including Teach Yourself German, Mein Kampf, and books about Nazi atrocities. He was partly inspired by the life and works of French author Marquis de Sade, whose name was the etymological inspiration for the term sadism. Brady rode a Tiger Cub motorcycle which he used to visit the Pennines. And here is Myra Hindley's story. She was born in Crumpsall on July the 23rd, 42, to parents Nellie and Bob Hindley, and raised in Gordon, then a working class area of Manchester dominated by Victorian slum housing. Her father was an alcoholic who was frequently violent towards his wife and children. The family home was in poor condition, and Hindley was forced to sleep in a single bed next to her parents' double bed. Their living situation deteriorated further when Hindley's younger sister Maureen was born in August 1946. The following year, 5-year-old Myra was sent to live nearby with her grandmother. Hindley's father had served with the parachute regiment and was stationed in North Africa, Cyprus, and Italy during the Second World War. He had been known as a hard man while in the army, and he expected his daughter to be equally tough. He taught her to fight and insisted that she stick up for herself. When Hindley was aged about 8, a local boy scratched her cheek, drawing blood. She burst into tears and ran to her father, who threatened to leather her if she did not retaliate. Hindley found the boy and knocked him down with a series of punches. As she wrote later, at 8 years old, I scored my first victory. Malcolm McCulloch, professor of forensic psychiatry at the Cardiff University, had written that Hindley's relationship with her father brutalized her. She was not only used to violence in the home, but rewarded for it outside. When this happens at a young age, it can distort a person's reaction to such situations in life. In June 1957, one of Hindley's closest friends, 13-year-old Michael Higgins, invited Hindley to go swimming with friends at a local disused reservoir, but she instead went out elsewhere with another friend. Higgins drowned in the reservoir, and Hindley, a good swimmer, was deeply upset and blamed herself. She took up a collection for a wreath. His funeral was held at St. Francis Monastery in Gordon Lane. So there we got the answers there. She was not there when he drowned. The monastery where Hindley had been baptized a Catholic as an infant in 42 had a lasting effect on her. Hindley's father had insisted she have a Catholic baptism. Her mother agreed on the condition that she not be sent to a Catholic school, believing that all the monks taught was catechism. Hindley was increasingly drawn to the Roman Catholic Church after she started at Ryder Brow Secondary Modern and began taking instruction for formal reception into the church soon after Higgins' funeral. She took the confirmation name of Veronica and received her first communion in November 1958. Hindley's first job was a junior clerk at a local electrical engineering firm. She ran errands, typed, made tea, and was well liked enough that when she lost her first week's wage packet, the other women took up a collection to replace it. At age 17, Hindley became engaged after a short courtship, but called it off several months later after deciding the young man was immature and unable to provide her with the life she wanted. She took weekly judo lessons at a local school, but found partners reluctant to train with her as she was often slow to release her grip. Henley took a job at Bradby and Hitchlip, an engineering company in Gordon, but was dismissed for absenteeism after 6 months. Then says there's a lot on here's as a couple. In January 61, the 18-year-old Henley joined Millward's as a typist. She soon became infatuated with Brady. Henley began a diary, and although she had dates with other men, some of the entries detail her fascination with Brady, to whom she eventually spoke for the first time on July 27th. Over the next few months, she continued to make entries, but grew increasingly disillusioned with Brady until December 27th, when he asked her on a date to the cinema. Many sources state that the film was Judgment at Nuremberg, but Hilly recalled it as King of Kings. Brady and Henley's dates followed a regular pattern: a trip to the cinema, usually to watch X rated film, then back to Henley's house to drink German wine. Brady then gave Henley reading material, and the pair spent their lunch breaks reading aloud to one another from accounts of Nazi atrocities. Henley began to emulate an ideal of Aryan perfection, bleaching her hair blonde and applying thick crimson lipstick. She occasionally expressed concern at some aspects of Brady's character. In a letter to a childhood friend, she mentioned an incident where she had been drugged by Brady, but also wrote of her obsession with him. A few months later, she asked her friend to destroy the letter. In her 30,000 word plea for parole submitted to Home Secretary Myra Reade, Hindley said, within months, he, Brady, had convinced me that there was no God at all. He could have told me that the earth was flat, the moon was made of green cheese, and the sun rose in the west. I would have believed him. Such was his power of persuasion. Hindley began to change her appearance further, wearing high boots, short skirts, and leather jackets, clothing considered risque for the period. Both she and Brady became less sociable to their colleagues. They were regulars at the library, borrowing books on philosophy as well as crime and torture. They also read works by the Marquis de Sade, Frederick Nietzsche, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. I don't know if I said that right. Although Hindley was not a qualified driver, she passed her test on November 7th, 63, after failing 3 times. She often hired a band in which a couple planned bank robberies. Hindley befriended George Clitheroe, the president of the Cheadle Rifle Club, and on several occasions visited 2 local shooting ranges. Clitheroe, although puzzled by her interest, arranged for her to buy a 22 rifle from a gun merchant in Manchester. She also asked to join a pistol club, but she was a poor shot and allegedly bad tempered. So Clitheroe told her that she was unsuitable. She did, however, manage to purchase a Webley 45 and a Smith& Wesson 38 from other members of the club. Brady and Henley's plans for robbery came to nothing but they became interested in photography. Brady already owned a box brownie, which he used to take photographs of Hindley and her dog, Puppet, but he upgraded to a more sophisticated model and also purchased lights and darkroom equipment. The pair took photographs of each other at that time would have been considered explicit. For Hindley, this demonstrated a marked change from her earlier, more shy and prudish nature. So here they are as murderers. Hindley later claimed that Brady began to talk about committing the perfect murder around the beginning of July 63 and often spoke to her about Meyer Levin's Compulsion, published as a novel in 56 and adapted for the cinema in 59. The story tells a fictionalized account of Leopold and Leib case, two young men from wealthy families who attempt to commit the perfect murder of a 12-year-old boy and escape the death penalty because of their age. By this stage, Brady had moved in with Hindley at her grandmother's house in Bannock Street, Gordon, and on the 12th of July, the two murdered their first victim, 16-year-old Pauline Reade. Reade had attended school with Hindley's younger sister, Maureen, and had also been in a short relationship with David Smith. Dude, what? Wait a minute. Hold on. Oh, their brother-in-law. Okay. Um, Police found nobody who had seen Reade immediately before her disappearance, and although the 15-year-old Smith was among the people questioned by police, he was cleared of any involvement in her death. Brady and Hindley were not among the people questioned. So let's go over here right quick. Let's go to Reade. Here she is right here. Here's Pauline Reade. Remains kept by police. Remains of the Moore murders. She's a beautiful girl. Remains of the Moore murders' first victim were kept by police for 30 years without her family's knowledge. And Brady and Myra Hindley admitted killing 16-year-old Pauline Reade in 63 while in prison in the 80s. Greater Manchester Police said it recently became aware some of her remains were kept for investigative purposes and has since apologized. The teenager's niece told the Manchester Evening News she was devastated by the discovery. Jackie Reade said, "The police called me in the middle of August and said they had stumbled across some stuff. They said it was a piece of her jawbone, and I couldn't believe it. It was heartbreaking. We thought she was all there together. These parts should not have been separated from her." Here's the two culprits right there. Pauline disappeared on July the 12th, 1963, while on her way to a disco near her Manchester home. Her remains are found on Saddleworth Moor in Oldham in 1987, and she was buried in Gordon Cemetery. Okay, so we'll go over there, go back to here. The couple's next victim, 12-year-old John Kilbride, was lured away from a market in the town of Ashton under Lynn on 23rd November and murdered on Saddleworth Moor, where his body was buried. A huge search was undertaken with over 700 statements taken and 500 missing posters printed. 8 days after he failed to return home, 2,000 volunteers scoured waste ground and derelict buildings. Henley hired a vehicle the week after Kilbride went missing and again on December 21st, apparently to make sure the burial sites at Saddleworth Moor had not been disturbed. In February 64, she bought a second-hand Austin Traveler, but soon also traded it for a mini pickup. So let's make sure that this one right here, John Kilbride. Here he is right here. John Kilbride, a happy and cheerful 12-year-old boy, was enjoying his second year at St. Damian's Catholic Secondary School when his life was tragically cut short. Despite academic struggles, John had quickly found a new circle of close friends, a sweetheart, and a spot on the football team. His younger brother Danny, who passed away in 2011, remembered their close bond. John was 11 months older than me. He made some new friends at that school because the kids came in from different towns. He was a kid who was well liked, always cheerful. He loved his football. We all supported Ashton United and used to go to the matches on a Saturday. The Kilbride household, a tight knit, traditional, and part Irish family, consisted of Sheila and Patrick Sr. and their 7 children. John and Danny were the oldest, sharing a bedroom. Responsibility was shared among the 9 family members, especially after Patrick Sr. was laid off from his building job. John was diligent with his chores, happily visiting his maternal grandmother, Margaret Doran, every morning to help with her house and garden. His brother Terry, who sadly passed away in July of this year, recalled that John would whistle the Z Cars theme song on his way back home, a habit also remembered by neighbors who described him as a cheerful boy with a wide, gap-toothed smile and a trusting, adventurous nature. The day John vanished on November 22nd, 63, the day before John Kilbride was murdered, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. While some have suggested Brady and Hindley deliberately chose this timing to cause a distraction, evidence points to coincidence. They had already planned John's murder for that date, with Hindley having already hired the car. If anything, they would have likely relished the news coverage, provided it didn't link them to the crime. The Kilbride family, like many others, watched the news of JFK's death with shock. Danny Kilbride recalled, "Everybody was talking about it. You never heard of things like that then. All the bad stuff seemed to escalate after that." On Saturday, the 16th of November, Brady and Henley hired a light-colored Ford Anglia, a popular and unassuming family car, from Warren's Autos. This was the first of 3 cars Henley would hire within a month, with Brady insisting on such precautions to divert suspicions. On the morning of November 23rd, Henley, dressed in black trews, a leather jacket, and a high-necked sweater, picked up Brady and their dog, Bruce, to establish an alibi. They drove to Leek in Staffordshire before heading to their planned spot, Ashton Market. John Kilbride's Saturday began normally. Danny had done his paper round, and John had run errands for his grandmother. After lunch, he playfully teased his younger siblings. 3 of his friends, all named John, called for him to go to the cinema. Sheila, anxious due to Pauline Reade's recent disappearance, warned John about bad men, but not bad women. John, a reliable boy who loved the cinema, promised to be careful as he left wearing a white shirt, gray flannel trousers, black Zipaduke shoes, and a gray check sports jacket with football shaped buttons. His mother reminded him, "Whoever did it's only a train ride from here, so always be on your guard." The last sighting, John Ryan, one of John's friends, later testified that he saw the A-rated movie The Mongols at the Pavilion Picture House. After leaving at 5 p.m. in the dark, foggy streets of Ashton, they went to the market to earn money by running errands. Ryan last saw John at about 5:25 p.m. by some salvage bins near a carpet dealer's stall. There was no one with him. It was about 5:25 p.m. when I last saw him. I never saw him after that. This memory haunted Ryan for years. By 7 o'clock that evening, John was likely already deceased, though his family was unaware. Danny recalled the growing worry. John was usually home by 5 o'clock at the latest. Then it got to about 9 o'clock, and my mom knew he wouldn't stop out that late. So my mom went to my auntie's because we didn't have a phone, and she called the police from there. Sheila quickly suspected the worst, but maintained hope for nearly 2 years. The police launched an extensive search, with Detective Chief Inspector John Down leading the effort. They interviewed market traders, searched vehicles as gifts, conducted house-to-house inquiries, and distributed 500 posters. Over 700 statements were taken, and on the 1st of December 1963, over 2,000 people participated in a detailed search of the Ashton-under-Lyne district. National press covered the story, and Ashton police canceled their annual dance. Despite deploying tracker dogs, frogmen in the River Terror, and assistance from cadets and soldiers, John remained missing. One neighbor tragically remarked, "It's as if the ground had opened and swallowed him up." At home, Sheila and Patrick Sr. tried to shield their other children from their anguish. Life continued as normally as possible. Danny remembered the painful school assemblies every Monday morning. The headmaster said, "Let's say a prayer for John Kilbride." And every single kid in school turned round and stared at me. It was just terrible. Sheila continued her desperate search, even traveling to Barry on a rumor, clutching her son's photo. At Christmas, the family gathered round a table with an empty place for John, and Sheila continued to buy him presents for his next two birthdays, always holding on to hope. Discovery and convictions. Tragically, all hope was shattered on October 21st, 65, when John's remains were discovered buried in a shallow grave near Sale Fart Moss, Saddleworth Moor. He was the third and final Morse murder victim found during the initial investigation. Due to the severe decomposition, his mother, Sheila Kilbride, had to identify him through his clothing, and the cause of death could not be definitely ascertained. John's trousers and underpants had been pulled down and knotted, indicating a brutal sexual assault. Evidence against Brady and Hindley included Brady's notebook containing John Kilbride's name, the hire car receipts for November 23rd, and other dates which were part of their alibi. Various photographs taken near the burial site, including one of Hindley's posing directly on John's grave. Wow! Can you believe that? The disarray of John's clothing suggested sexual assault. Photographs of Brady and Hindley taken at least as part of their alibi. Conflicting accounts. M. Brady and Myra Hindley arrived at Ashton Market shortly after John Kilbride parted ways with his friends. The exact details of how John was lured into Myra's car remain unclear, but it's certain he was taken, likely with the expectation he would offer less resistance than the previous victim, Pauline Reade. Detective Peter Toppin, who investigated this case in the 80s, noted Brady's first enjoyment of power over children, seeing them as less trouble to kill than adults. Hi there, Bucket. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Brady claims he remained discreetly positioned while Myra approached John, luring him with a story about finding a lost glove. Hindley, however, offered two conflicting accounts. Initially, she said they spotted John buying broken biscuits and Brady spoke to him. Later, he claimed Brady saw John first, then approached him with her, using lines like, "You're out late for such a young boy, aren't you?" to draw him in. Myra then offered John a ride home, which he accepted. During the drive, she promised him sherry at their home and then suggested they retrieve anniversary gloves from the moor, exploiting his trusting nature. Upon reaching the moor, Myra parked in their usual lay-by. She claimed Brady and John exited the car, and she later followed pre-arranged instructions. Drive away for about half an hour, then return and flash her headlights 3 times. She was also to retrieve a rifle and ammunition for insurance or to shoot anyone suspicious. Wow. Brady's account differed significantly. He stated all three walked onto the moor, and when John became uneasy, Brady, after a prearranged signal, grabbed John's throat. Myra allegedly joined in restraining the struggling boy, pinned his wrists, Brady then pulled down John's trousers and underwear, tied a knot in his underpants, a detail later confirmed by the body's recovery. Within minutes, John was dead, strangled by Brady, while Myra restrained his legs. Brady claimed to have slapped John's bottom before burying him face down in a shallow grave, triumphantly shouting at the sky. Wow. John's remains were badly decomposed when found 2 years later due to being buried near a stream bed, making it impossible to ascertain a precise cause of death. On sorry, take a deep breath. On the 6th of May, 1966, I.M. Brady was found guilty of the murders of John Kilbride, Lesley Ann Downey, and Edward Evans, while Myra Hindley was convicted of the murders of Downey and Evans. The evidence for John Kilbride's murder was insufficient for conviction. However, given her role in hiring the car and her presence in the incriminating photographs, she was found guilty of harboring, assisting, and maintaining Brady, knowing he had killed John. Excuse me. This is really upsetting me, so excuse me. This conviction added an extra 7 years to her 2 life sentences. In 1990, after Hindley confessed her full role in all 5 murders, both her and Brady's sentences were upgraded to whole life orders. Now there's Keith Bennett, also aged 12, disappeared in the Longsight district of Manchester on June 16, 1964. His stepfather, Jimmy Johnson, became a suspect in the 2 years following Bennett's disappearance. Johnson was taken for questioning on 4 occasions. Detectives searched under the floorboards of the family home and discovered that the houses in a row were connected, extending the search to the entire street. So let's go over here to police have insisted the search for Moore's murder, Ian Brady's final missing victim, and continuing outside and public views, and have repeated calls for information that could help with the investigation. Excuse me. Brady, who died 8 years ago, tortured and killed 5 children with Myra Hindley, but he never revealed where 12-year-old Keith Bennett's remains were buried. But Keith's mother, Winnie Johnson, who died in 2012, had begged the killer to do so. Greater Manchester Police said, while visible searches have paused over time, with the most recent taking place in 2022, an investigation team continues our work to find the answers to Keith's family deserves. The force release update as missing pages from an autobiography written by Brady could throw new light on where Keith is buried, according to a new BBC documentary. They got it in a 3-part series, if I'm not sure, I'm mistaken, okay? It said detectives remain very interested in any information that could lead to the discovery of Keith, and officers would be seeking to obtain, review, and establish the relevance of all the information held by the documentary team. We're committed to act where credible information is shared, Force said. We are in regular contact with Keith's family, who are central to any action we take. They're kept updated on the ongoing lines of inquiry, some of which could be jeopardized by public disclosure, and no further comment on these matters will be given. Brady, who was jailed in '66, buried 4 of his victims in graves on Saddleworth Moor, Greater Manchester. Okay, so we're not going to go, let's go down here a little bit more about Keith. Keith's brother, Alan Bennett, has called for any missing material to be made available to police because it could contain vital information in regard to the search for Keith. He was kept informed of the discovery of the missing memorial pages by the makers of the Moore's murders, A Search for Justice. Let's go over here to this now. Boy, this is disgusting, ain't it, y'all, with these murders, right? It said that Maureen Hindley married David Smith on the 15th of August, 1964. The marriage was hastily arranged and performed at a register office. None of Maureen's family attended. Hindley did not approve of the marriage, and her mother was embarrassed, as 18-year-old Maureen, within 7 months pregnant, was marrying the 16-year-old Smith. The younger couple then moved into Smith's father's house in Ancoats district, although they were soon rehoused in a tower block flat on the new Hattersley Overspill housing estate. The day after the wedding, Brady suggested that the four take a day trip to Windermere. This was the first time Brady and Smith had met properly, and Brady was apparently impressed by Smith's demeanor. The two talked about society, the distribution of wealth, and the possibility of robbing a bank. The young Smith was similarly impressed by Brady, who throughout the day had paid for his food and wine. The trip to the Lake District was the first of many outings. Henley was apparently jealous of their friendship, but became closer to her sister. So, and also during '64, Henley, her grandmother, and Brady were rehoused as a part of the post-war slum clearances in Manchester. Moving to 1640 Brook Avenue, a newly built council house on the Hattersley Overspill estate near Cheshire Town of Hyde. Brady and Henley became friendly with Patricia Hodges, the 11-year daughter of a neighbor. Hodges accompanied the company on their trips to Saddlemoor Moor to collect peat, something that many householders on the new estate did to improve the soil in the gardens, which were full of clay and builders' rubble. The couple never harmed Hodges, since she lived only a few doors away, which would have made it easier for police to solve any disappearance. Early on Boxing Day in '64, Henley left her grandmother at a relative's house and refused to allow her back to Wardle Brook Avenue that night. That same day, 10-year-old Lesley Ann Downey disappeared from a fun fair in Ancoats. Despite a huge search, she was not found. Downey's stepfather, Alan West, was treated as a suspect by police and repeatedly questioned over her disappearance, but no evidence was uncovered, and the disappearance remained unsolved for nearly a year. The following day, Ellie brought her grandmother back home. Let's see what if I got that one on there. Here she is right here. Here's Lesley Ann Downey. Was a well-loved 10-year-old girl living in Manchester in the mid 1960s. Her mother, Ann West, described her as a perfect and responsible child who always did as she was told, and had worked hard to provide a stable home for Lesley and her three brothers. Finally settling in a council flat in Ancoats with her partner, Alan West. Lesley, though shy, was gaining confidence and joined school, and especially loved singing and dancing to her favorite song, Bobby's Girl. The family's Christmas in '64 was a happy one, filled with presents and festive cheer. The festive atmosphere continued into Boxing Day. Leslie wanted to go to the local fair, but her older brother Terry was home with the flu. Anne initially said no, but when a neighbor, 8-year-old Linda Clark, said she was going with her family, Anne relented. At about 4 p.m., Leslie, wearing a blue coat and red shoes, left the house. Conflicting accounts exist on who she went with, but the last confirmed sighting of her was around 5:35 p.m., standing alone by the Dodgems at the fair. Lesley Ann Downey had vanished. The tape recording. After Leslie failed to return home, her mother's initial worry turned into a cold dread. The family and police immediately launched a search with the community of Ancoats, rallying to help. For months, the search continued, but Leslie's case became a cold missing persons file. The family was left in agonizing uncertainty. The breakthrough came nearly a year later, on October the 6th, 1965, when Myra Hindley's brother-in-law, David Smith, witnessed Ian Brady kill Edward Evans. Smith's tip-off led to the arrest of Brady and Hindley and the discovery of a trove of damning evidence in a suitcase. The evidence included photos of Lesley Ann Downey and most chillingly, a 16-minute tape recording of her final moments. Lord have mercy. The recording, which has never been released to the public due to its profound horror, revealed in excruciating detail what happened to Lesley. Specifically, Brady and Hindley were heard trying to force a gag into Lesley's mouth and undress her, and the tape, as previously mentioned, ran on for 16 minutes as the little girl frantically begged for her mother. The contents of the tape were so disturbing that when it was played at the trial, hardened detectives and journalists were brought to tears. The recording apparently ended so that Brady could plug in his photography light. He took multiple photographic photos of the child before she was raped and murdered. The trial, the discovery of the tape and photographs finally gave the police the identity of a missing child and a direct link to the killers. Massive search of Saddleworth Moor, prompted by another photograph found in the suitcase, led to the discovery of John Kilbride's body. During the search, Leslie's shallow grave was also found. The discovery brought a final painful closure to her family, who had to identify her from the horrific photographs. The Morse murders trial began on the 19th of April, 66. Prosecution, led by the Attorney General, Sir Elwyn Jones, presented an overwhelming amount of evidence. The tape recording of Lesley was the most damning piece of all. The defense attempted to portray Helen as a victim of Brady's manipulation, but the evidence proved her full culpability. On May the 6th, 66, Ann Brady and Myra Hindley were both found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. The verdict brought an end to the legal proceedings, but the memory of the horrific crimes and the suffering of the victims' families would haunt the nation for decades to come. The search for other victims on the moor will continue, and the case of the Moors murders will become one of the most notorious in British history. I don't know if I want to read the full account of her murder, okay? And I'm going to click it and just see. She's a beautiful girl right there. I'm not going to be, it's going to be hard to read, so I don't think I'll be able to read the full amount here. But y'all will be able to go there if you like. That's on medium.com. More of her life is there. So sorry, this is kind of hard. Okay, so it said by February 65, Hodges had stopped visiting Waterbrook Avenue, but Smith was still a regular visitor. Brady gave Smith books to read, and the two discussed robbery. On Henley's 23rd birthday in July 65, her sister and brother-in-law, who had until then been living with relatives, were rehoused in Underwood Court, a new multi-story block of flats not far from Waterbrook Avenue. The two couples began to see each other more regularly, but usually only on Brady's terms. Many years later, Henley claimed that she took part in the killings only because Brady had drugged her, was blackmailing her with pornographic pictures he had taken of her, and had threatened to kill Maureen. She also claimed that on journey home from Saddleworth Moor, the murder of Pauline Reade, Brady had warned her that she would end up in the same grave as her victim. In 2008, her solicitor, Andrew McCooney, reported that she told him, I ought to have him been hanged. I deserved it. My crime was worse than Brady's because I enticed the children. They would never enter the car without my role. I've always regarded myself as worse than Brady. Pauline Reade, on July the 12th, 63, Brady told Henley that he wanted to commit the perfect murder. Driving down Gordon Lane, Brady saw a young girl and signaled Henley, but did not stop because she recognized the girl as an 18 8-year-old neighbor of her mother. Sometime after 7 p.m., Brady signaled Hindley to stop for 16-year-old Pauline Reade, a schoolmate of Hindley's sister Maureen, who was on Broxmore Street on her way to a dance. Hindley offered Reade a lift. At various times, Hindley gave conflicting statements about the extent to which she versus Brady was responsible for Reade being selected as the first victim, but said she felt that there would be less attention given to the disappearance of a teenager than to a child. Once Reade was in the van, Hindley asked her to help in searching Saddleworth Moor for an expensive lost glove. Reade agreed, and they drove there. When Brady arrived on his motorcycle, Hindley told Reade he would be helping in the search. Hindley later claimed that she waited in the van while Brady took Reade onto the moor. Brady returned alone after about 30 minutes and took Hindley to the spot where Reade lay dying. Reade's clothes were in disarray, and she had been nearly decapitated by 2 cuts to the throat, including a 4-inch incision across her voice box, inflicted with some considerable force, and the 2 which collared her coat and the throat chain had been pushed. When Hindley asked Brady whether he had raped Reade, Brady replied, "Of course I did." Hindley stayed with Reade while Brady retrieved a spade he had hidden nearby on a previous visit, then returned to the van while Brady buried Reade. In Brady's account, Hindley was not only present in the attack, but participated in the sexual assault. Oh my goodness. John Kilbride in the early evening of November 23rd, 63, at the market in Ashton-under-Lyne, Brady and Hindley offered 12-year-old John Kilbride a lift home after also promising him a bottle of sherry. Once Kilbride was inside Hindley's hired Ford Anglia car, Brady said they would have to make a detour to their home for the sherry. Brady then suggested another detour, this time for a search for a glove Hindley had lost at Saddleworth Moor. When they reached the moor, Brady took Kilbride with him while Hindley waited in a car. Brady then sexually assaulted Kilbride and tried to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated blade before strangling him with a shoelace or string. He then buried Kilbride's body in a shallow grave and at some point afterwards photographed Hindley and her pet dog standing atop the recently disturbed ground. Early in the evening of June the 16th, 64, Hindley asked 12-year-old Keith Bennett, who was on his way to his grandmother's house alongside, for help in loading some boxes into her Mini, after which she said she would drive him home. Brady was in the back of the van. Hindley drove to a lay-by on the Saddleworth Moor, and Brady went off with Bennett, supposedly looking for a lost glove. After about 30 minutes, Brady returned alone, carrying a spade that he had hidden there earlier, and in response to Hindley's questions, said that he had sexually assaulted Bennett and strangled him with a piece of string. Lesley Ann Downey. Brady and Hindley visited Funfair and Ancoats on December 26, 64, and noticed that 10-year-old Lesley Ann Downey was apparently alone. They approached her and deliberately dropped some shopping they were carrying, then asked her for help in taking the packages to her car and then to Wardlebrook Avenue. So y'all watch for that with your kids. Make sure you say, yeah, it's nice to help somebody, but don't go and help them to the car or something. That's going to endanger you. That's how these two people did, okay? At the house, Downey was undressed, gagged, and forcibly posed with photographs before being raped and killed, perhaps strangled by a piece of string. The attack was recorded on a reel-to-reel audio tape, with both Brady and Hindley's voices appeared as their victim screamed and begged for mercy. Hindley later maintained that she went to run a bath for Downey and found the victim dead when she returned. Brady claimed that Hindley committed the murder. The following morning, Brady and Hindley drove Downey's body to Saddleworth Moor and buried her naked with her clothes at her feet in a shallow grave. This is hard to read, y'all. I'm doing this for you, Cash. I hope you come and watch this. You wanted me to let the people know about this. Edward Evans on the evening of October the 6th, 1965. Hindley drove Brady to Manchester Central Railway Station, where she waited outside in the car while he selected the victim. Wow, waited at the railway station, okay? I guess it shows the dangers of your kids traveling too, okay? After a few minutes, Brady reappeared in the company of 17-year-old Edward Evans, an apprentice engineer who lived in Hardwick, to whom he introduced Hindley as a sister. Brady later claimed that he picked up Evans for a sexual encounter. They drove to Brady and Hindley's home at Wardle Brook Avenue, where they relaxed over a bottle of wine. At some point, Brady sent Hindley to fetch David Smith, her brother in law. Although Hindley's family had not approved of Maureen's marriage to Smith, Brady had been cultivating a friendship with his brother in law, which increasingly worried Hindley as she felt it compromised her safety. Hindley returned with Smith and told him to wait outside for her signal. A flashing light. When the signal came, Smith knocked on the door and was met by Brady, who asked if he wanted to come in, the miniature wine bottles, and left them in the kitchen, saying he was going to collect the wine. Smith later told the police. I waited about a minute or two, then suddenly I heard a hell of a scream. It sounded like a woman, really high pitched. Then the screams carried on, one after another, really loud. Then I heard Myra shout, "Dave, help him!" very loud. When I ran in, I just stood inside the living room and I saw a young lad. He was lying with his head and shoulders on the couch and his legs were on the floor. He was facing upwards. Ian was standing over him, facing him with his legs on either side of the young lad's legs. The lad was still screaming. Ian had a hatchet in his hand. He was holding it above his head, and he hit the lad on the left side of the head with the hatchet. I heard the blow. It was a terrible hard blow. It sounded horrible. Smith then watched Brady throttle Evans with a length of electrical cord. Brady sprained his ankle in the struggle, and Evans' body was too heavy for Smith to carry to the car on his own. So they wrapped it in plastic sheeting and put it in his spare bedroom with the intention of disposing of it later. Wow. I don't think I can read any more of this. Sorry, everybody, okay? Okay, let me go over here to this other thing over here I want to show y'all. There's a monster of the moors. There was Ian Brady right here. Within months, he had convinced me that there was no God at all. He could tell me Earth was flat. That was just something that she was saying earlier. There's a picture of the lovebirds, slaughter of the innocents. Here's where Pauline Reade, 16 from Gordon, disappeared on her way to disco. She got into a car with Hindley while Brady secretly followed on a motorbike at Saddleworth Moor. Brady murdered and buried her. According to Pauline's best friend, when she came to my house, she would ask me to walk her home if it was dusk. She was not the sort to get into a car with a stranger. There is John Kilbride, the eldest of 7 children from Ashton under Lynn, snatched, sexually assaulted, and murdered. This was the brother that Terry Kilbride says my mother always used to be singing when she was cooking or ironing, but that stopped. Everything died. No, I don't know what's trying to send a message to somebody I don't want to talk. Oh man, they don't need to know that, do they? So this right here is Keith Bennett vanished after his mom watched him across the road to walk the last few yards to his grand's house in Longsight. Brady and Henley confessed to his murder and that of Pauline Reade in 1987, long after their 66 murder trial. Keith's mother, Winnie Johnson, died aged 78 in 2012. Her son's body was never found. His remains are somewhere on Saddleworth Moor. And this is Winnie Johnson, what she has stated. I need my keys. I need my keys to be returned from these bleak, cold, and windy moors that look down on me from almost everywhere. I turn in my hometown of Manchester. My heart is torn from me. It's kind of hard to read the red lettering. I'm sorry. So there's Lesley Ann Downey. She was a cutie. She lured away from Ancoats Fun Fair near her home and killed at Hindley's home in Wardlebrook Avenue, Hattersley. There she was sexually abused and strangled, and despite the commotion, no one reported hearing anything untoward. So I wish I could. The next door neighbor said we heard shouting. Then we heard boys and girls screaming. But of course, I thought it was just boys and girls lurking about. The mother, Ann West, is a good child who always did her homework, a perfect child any mother will be proud of. And here's Edward Evans, was lured from Manchester Central Station and died in a hell of an axe blows inside the couple's home. The murder was witnessed by Henry's 17-year-old brother-in-law, David Smith, who ran into the room to find Brady standing over his victim with an axe. He later told police, I heard the blow. It was a terrible, hard blow. It sounded terrible. In terror for his life, Smith helped Brady clean up and take the body upstairs. Then all three had tea. David remained for hours until he felt it safe to leave and strode away, faint and calm. Only once out of sight did he break into a sprint for home. Today there appears to be no living close relatives of Edward Evans. If he would have reacted or an accident, he probably would have been killed as well. The lonely resting place. We meet in an evil land that is near to the gates of hell that was Rudyard Kipling. Saddleworth Moor is named for a nearby parish, a vast and lonely expanse of high moorland and woods that stretches from the western side of the Pennines to Oldham. It is a place of folklore and tragedies, old and new, an area made infamous in the 20th century as the final resting place of lost children and a playground of two hideous lovers. The moorland around Saddleworth is peat bog and open grazing land, stretching for acres around. It is a remote, lonely place where occasional walkers may see only a few sheep grazing on lower slopes. And it has a history associated with violence, stretching back to Roman times when the moorland was home to bloody and fiercely fought boundary battles. It first gained real notoriety, however, in 1832, when a father and son were murdered in a savage attack that brought Saddleworth to the attention of the nation. William Bradbury, or Bill O'Jack, as he was known, the 84-year-old landlord of the Moorcock Inn, and his son Thomas, a 46-year-old gamekeeper, were found in the pub, the walls of blood streaming with gore, according to the Manchester Courier newspaper, and their assailants were never found. The violence with which they met their end had seen their death pass into folklore. Such interest did their tragic end excite that ere they were removed from human sight, thousands on thousands came to see the bloody scene of catastrophe. That is part of a longer inscription on their tombstone. In 1949, 24 people lost their lives when a plane crashed on Saddleworth Moor after a flight from Belfast. You're going on and on. There's searches and stuff. All right. So let me stop the share now. I want to thank everybody for coming in. This has been hard to go over, hard to talk about, but we know that this is very important for us to do. I thank you all for coming in, and may God bless each and every one of you.